pleasure of introducing Genevieve Leveille. I hope I pronounced it correctly. She's the founder of AgriLedger. She's currently involved in a project within Haiti, which is funded by the World Bank, and it's in collaboration with the Haiti Ministry of Commerce. You have the floor, Genevieve.
So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here among you guys. So wanted to talk a bit around how the technology monitoring can really help us as we look to really create sustainability in data. So first things is some of the statistics actually which are put out by FAO, which has to do with 600 million people get sick a year from foodborne disease. 40% of those are children. 420,000 people are actually dying, and 125,000 are children. So if we think about what it's doing to our future, that's really big. Sorry. So there is a lot of emerging technology in agriculture. You have everything from remote sensors, so there's a lot of work being done by ESA. Last April, they launched, I think actually last March, they launched their latest satellite, which can actually measure water content at the at the minimal amount, and also can look to see if there are any diseases in the earth. So the technology is really advancing. We also have new crop being done, and also genetics, which allows us to provide medicine to a large number of people. But between that, you also have this idea of distributed ledger technology, which is really a new it's not, as was said before, it's not really new technology. It's now becoming more acceptable to use and providing us information in a way that it doesn't keep the data in one place. But at the end of it, we really also need to make sure that we are interacting with the people, and at the human level is really, so when we talk about smallholder farmers, we need to understand what is necessary in those communities and how to have the conversation which is going to help foster better global food policies. There are a lot of frustration currently being felt by smallholder farmers. First of all is access to market, access to finance. About 80% of the food today is being created by them, but they don't have access to markets. So how do we actually look to mitigate those issues? So what is there, in my view, there are three areas which are vital. That is production, delivery, and sales. So we need to look at these aspects to be able to really mitigate and create sustainability in the system. They are integral to the supply chain, and we need to make sure how we go about bringing them in. So production. So in terms of production, many times they do not have access to the inputs, and they do not have direct access to the financing that is necessary to get to that production. So we really need to look at mechanism by which we foster better communication and also training for them on how to get these details. When it comes to delivery, the bigger issue again is financial. How do you support that delivery system? How do you create the infrastructure which is necessary? So it is really requires for us to look at ways to work with governments and also with bringing the logistic providers in there. We hear a lot of issues around logistics in terms, nowadays with climate control, a lot of them are getting hammered, but how do we bring them into the conversation? And I think that with the technology, there are ways to integrate them without, and getting them to understand the benefits. We're still at the forefront today of the technology. But if we don't look at ways as to how we best communicate, we are going to continue to see these great loss. I mean, I believe FAO is the one who has said that if we don't change by by 2050, there will not be enough food to feed the world. So therefore, we all are responsible for working on these solutions. Now, the sales process is very well known that many a time the farmers will sell at a discount in order to get access to cash. So in order to create sustainability through the transparency of the blockchain, you can actually now start involving the bankers and the financial institution to provide better financing and also assured financing, so reducing of the risk. And the risk can also be spread out. So in Haiti, what we're doing is that we're actually saying the produce belongs to the farmer all the way to the foreign market. And that produce, so instead of someone paying, the produce is paying for its transportation, for its servicing, for its transformation. And while using smart contract, also you start being able to measure that the quality is being met, because that's the biggest issue. If the quality and quantity is not being met, you can't get to the market and actually make the money. So now if you can prove to the buyer where it's been, and you can prove to the financer who has actually touched it, and then you have a better opportunity to actually create value. And I need to go back and find that quote, if it was attributed to FAO or to the World Bank. But there was a bit that I read where it says, as we look to export high-value items from rural areas, if we create that efficiency and we create the market access, we then can actually create efficient agro-businesses in those rural areas. And we know the stress that's happening on the urban level, where in Asia, they're actually looking for ways to get them back into the rural area. So unless you can create commerce and get those farmers to actually become entrepreneurs, why can't they be entrepreneurs? We all talk about, when we start an entrepreneurial journey, seed funding, growth. That's what we do with food. And it is an integral part of our lives every day. So we really need to look at solution. And I think we have an opportunity through this technology to really mitigate the trust issues. It's not, I don't prescribe to say we remove middlemen. What we do is we remove those who do not bring any value. And through the system, we now create trust-based access for everyone, not only the farmer, but also the customer. So as customers, we can now be assured that what we're buying comes from where it's coming. And also we can be assured that we are providing an adequate and fair remuneration to the person who produced it or the person who carried it. Now, I'm very excited to talk to you guys about a company that I got to meet. They're not blockchain, and that's where I want to get to. It doesn't have to be all blockchain. We can take data. So OceanMind is a company which has, using ESA data, mapped every ship, and now they're looking at ways to actually visualize where all the vessels are and track them. Now, that means tuna, anything which is caught in the wild, they can actually measure and provide sustainability data back to the government, to the store, or anyone who needs it. So really the restaurant can be sure that the food that they're selling, seafood they're selling, is sustainable. And what we talked about is that this data can then be used to drive smart contracts. So I think the next thing we're going to be looking at in the blockchain space is really this concept of oracles, systems which are centralized, which have certain information, and based on that information being able to make decision on those data points to then decide if there is either a penalty to be taken or there's a payment to be done. And that's where we're going to see going. And finally, the other company that we're looking to collaborate with is actually around Tanzania. It's a solar city, so creating really factorized agro-businesses. Their business is going to be producing food. But how do we look? So we need to look beyond just the blockchain technology at other technologies that we can bring in, such as solar, and creating the right efficiencies so that we can then be able to provide a business for those farmers. So I really would like to thank you for your time. It's been a great pleasure and looking forward to the talk. Thanks.